Ni hao guys, this is the Jade Palace, a channel where we seek inspiration to keep training and bettering ourselves year after year. And what can be a more powerful source of inspiration than art, right? Some people would go as far as to say inspiring and motivating audiences should be the primary goal for books, movies, songs or shows. There's definitely no denying that more often than not a good movie does light a fire under your butt, pushing you out into the world to face adventure and accomplish great deeds. Which is why today I'll share with you some of my favorite movies and shows that help me energize myself for another practice session. And yeah, with me being a Kung Fu practitioner, naturally my list leans towards the traditional side of martial arts, but this shouldn't mean that if you practice boxing or Krav Maga, this won't work for you at all. I'm sure everyone from every style or even outside of martial arts world can still find great value in these works. So to open up my list, at number 5 is Drunken Master and other early Jackie Chan flicks. If you want to really go deep down the old school Hong Kong action comedy rabbit hole, there is a number of somewhat similar titles for you, movies like Fearless Hyena and The Snake and the Eagle's Shadow, and if you only wish to get acquainted with the genre, the best of them is definitely The Drunken Master. I should throw in a warning though, some of those don't necessarily hold up by our today Western standards, and if you go in with an expectation of seeing a modern movie you're used to, you might be a little disappointed. Rather, I would advise to approach it more as a circus in a cinematic form, which is, as far as I understand, closer to those movies' roots in a Beijing opera type performances anyway. With that out of the way, let's get to what exactly makes these movies great for training motivation. The first thing to acknowledge is of course Jackie's personal talent, not just as a martial artist, but as an acrobat and a comedic actor as well. It's just one of those things where you look at someone go and you can't help but feel, I want to be like that guy, I want to be able to do what he does. It's pretty much what all those quote-unquote inspirational influencers do on social media these days, only in an old school movie form. The second thing that's just as important is simply the extent to which those movies breathe Kung Fu atmosphere in every shot. Now, many people today like to make fun of that classic Kung Fu aesthetics, talking about how cheesy it is or how it has nothing to do with actual practical effectiveness of martial arts. And sure, when those trappings cover for the lack of actual hard work and practical application in training, that's no good. By the way, I'll talk about that in much more detail in the next regular episode, dedicated specifically to this topic. But I also think there is a very positive aspect to this flashy, fancy style, which is bringing in some magic. A lot of the times training can feel dull, feel like a boring chore you have to do rather than want to. And it's those moments when the way it's shown in the old Hong Kong action movies in general, and especially Jackie Chan movies, with all the crazy theatrics and lack of realism, helps bring the fun and excitement back into the gym. Moving forward, at number 4 is Kung Fu Panda. You saw that one coming, didn't you? On a channel that pays so much homage to this title in everything from its name to its visual style, there's simply no way I won't use this chance to talk about one of my all-time favorites. First and foremost, an absolute masterpiece and one of the best films in the history of full-meter animation. As always with DreamWorks, gorgeous visuals, appealing characters, a lot of good-natured humor, and a slightly postmodern angle on an archetypical story. What then takes it from just great to the best ever is its amazing ability to explain profound philosophical ideas in a form that is accessible even for children. So it already deserves all the praise in the world as a regular family movie, and only after that do we even get to the martial arts side. First, this whole deal with Kung Fu aesthetics we've just talked about being 10 out of 10 in Jackie Chan's movies, well, Kung Fu Panda takes it and cranks it up to 12 the way only animation can. From the simple technical level of the juiciest colors and most breathtaking camera fly-throughs that you just can't get without involving some form of CG, to purely fantastical artistic metaphors like the choice of animal representation for the main cast. Think about it for a second. It's a good practice and a classic fairy tale trope anyway to have animals as your heroes and villains. They're both relatable to children and instantly communicate some idea of what their character might be, depending on how a certain animal is usually represented in culture. You know, the owl is old and wise, the fox is cunning, the lion is a king, that stuff. But the Kung Fu Panda creators took that and found a way to connect it with the animal references from traditional wushu. The Furious Five, they're not just some 5 random fighters in animal form, they're the legendary 5 animals of Shaolin. Now, it's not simply a tiger move here or a mantis style there in a Jackie Chan movie, it's the characters literally being a tiger and a mantis to represent them. So yeah, still the same beautiful Kung Fu aesthetics, but taking it to a whole another level visually, firing you up to go train the stuff yourself. Yet perhaps the best thing is how much of a Kung Fu fanatic the main character is himself. Playing with action figures at home and having dreams about fighting alongside your idols is one thing, but once Po gets to the gates of the palace, we see how far his obsession really goes. Literally risking his life just to get a glimpse of a demonstration, not being discouraged in the slightest by getting the shit beaten out of him and training again and again. His love of martial arts is truly contagious, and it's impossible not to fall for it.
I love Kung Fu!
Number 3. The Matrix. I come from a generation of 90s kids where there's pretty much no debate about the original Matrix being the greatest movie ever made. All the layers of depth, all the philosophical themes and the way they're craftily intertwined, it's enough to say that no matter how many people I ask about the main concept behind this film, I'm yet to hear an answer that repeats twice. That's how profound and multi-leveled it is. And then there are all the purely artistic decisions and influences on top. The cyberpunk style, the action, the VFX that was revolutionary for the era and set a standard for years to come. But leaving those aside, let's concentrate on the martial arts aspect. Of course, some of you might immediately go, "Oh, come on, how can you say it's good inspiration for training when this movie's most famous scene is just downloading all the skills directly into the brain, bypassing all the years of hard work on the mats, all the blood, sweat and tears left in the gym?" Kind of true. But I would also encourage you to look at it from a different angle. I think there is a case to be made for separating the more technical or practical side of actually putting in the work in class, the hands-on drilling of moves, separating that from understanding the concepts and philosophy behind the moves. If you've been training even for a few years, you've probably experienced this. You've put in the hours, you've drilled some skills into your body, yet you're still not entirely sure of where those separate things fit in a bigger picture. It's like you've collected all the necessary puzzle pieces, but can't figure out how to put them together. And then suddenly some experience, whether it's a belt promotion, competition, some real-life encounter, triggers that revelation and everything starts to quickly fall into place of its own accord. That's Neo's "I know Kung Fu" moment. But more importantly, that's his moment of truth at the end, when for the first time he sees the Matrix for a sequence of ones and zeros it really is. And that's the true power of The Matrix as a martial arts movie. Forget the training montages. Fun and motivational as those might be, this movie does something much more profound in the way it connects the progress of one's abilities to the progress in their understanding and vision. It elevates martial arts from a mere technical tool for achieving mundane goals to a level of something that gives you a better, deeper and clearer read on both yourself and the world around. At number 2, The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. So, we've talked artistic metaphors for martial arts concepts, we've talked about presenting your growth in martial arts as development of a deeper knowledge of the world around that literally gives you superpowers. Well, how about a franchise that has found a perfect way to mix together all of the above? Cause let's be real, It is pretty much impossible to come up with a more vibrant and impactful artistic representation for traditional Kung Fu styles than transforming them into elemental magic. Whoever first sparked that idea, I take off my hat to them, because this was an absolute stroke of genius. Again, connecting martial arts training with supernatural abilities itself is nothing new. It is a classic trope that long predates modern fantasy genres and goes all the way back to ancient mythology. But the way it's done here, I feel, ties together different traditions and source materials very neatly and effectively. On one hand, you have the 4 schools of magic drawing their strength from what's considered the 4 fundamental elements of nature. That is very much a staple, an archetype, or you could even say a cliché of Western fantasy school. An optional addition on top of it, one that's sometimes ignored but often leaned into, is the idea that each element would also represent a different mentality, temperament, and/or culture built around it. On the other side, there's Eastern fantasy tradition, spanning from 18th century novels to modern anime, a tradition where ninjas become invisible and old masters spread chi around their skin to make it bulletproof. Finally, you have real, authentic Kung Fu styles that might not necessarily make any specific claims for supernatural, but just have a very colorful vocabulary where every other move and form bears a reference to mythical beings like dragons and phoenixes. So to tie it all up like the Avatar creators did is truly a masterful artistic achievement, and with that, one that definitely brings magic into our martial arts practice. An honorable mention, Doctor Strange. You will notice this one is the 5th title in a top 5 video, yet it's not numbered as 1. So yes, you guessed it, while writing the script, I came to the conclusion that the greatest martial arts movie of all times deserves a separate video of its own, which will of course come next. But also, the reason I put this one as an honorable mention and not a regular entry on the list is because A. I wanted to talk about it after breaking down all the previous ones, even as I can't really put it higher than those in good faith. And also B, because it's not strictly speaking a martial arts movie now, is it? Yet it very much feels like one. To me, the secret to this film is how masterfully its creators walk the fine line of respectful homage, not allowing to turn into blatant plagiarism. It's one of those incalculable balancing acts that you can only ever get right on pure intuition and good taste. But if I had to formulate what makes the difference, I'd say we tend to call it plagiarism and get angry about it when we feel as if the authors try to be sneaky about it, try to pass someone else's ideas for their own. Where homage might be doing all the same things, but taking the audience in on the trick, going, "Hey, you see what we did there? Wink wink." And that is why I wanted to talk about Doctor Strange after all those previous titles, because to me it's pretty much a perfect compilation of concepts that make those great in the first place. The way the reality of the world is revealed to our protagonist is very Matrix-like. His training obviously draws inspirations from Hong Kong classics alongside Kung Fu Panda. Connection between fighting and magic is absolutely reminiscent of Avatar. Forget martial arts movies. How about those space-bending visuals from Inception, which by the way many regard to be the Matrix of the next decade. Even his flying cape instantly reminds 90s kids of an old friend we grew up with in the Disney Renaissance era. And yet, at no point are we outraged. "Oh, you efforts, you stole this thing from that other thing." Instead, we feel this movie does exactly what art is supposed to do. Stands on the shoulders of giants from the previous generation to keep building its own legacy from there. And again, going back to training motivation, Doctor Strange, while not being a martial arts movie per se, does a wonderful job of giving you that feeling that learning combat skills is almost like learning magic. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, kindly project your chi towards the like and subscribe buttons. Also, you know by now that yours truly is on a mission to educate people and dispel myths about traditional martial arts. So if you think it's a noble cause and want to participate, there is no better way than to share this on your social media. And if you're seriously committed, You can even become a supporter of the channel, which by the way also allows you to watch original, less heavily edited cuts. Finally, and most importantly, if you want to come and learn Kung Fu with us, all the links to the school are below. And remember,
even if my fingers could do that, my hands would just be waving in the air. I mean, how do I get from here to there?
How did you get to reattach severed nerves and put a human spine back together, bone by bone?
Study and practice, years of it.